It's called the Terrorism Confinement Center, or CICOT. It's the centerpiece of Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele's self-declared war on gangs.
6 months. That's all it took to build a colossal prison in El Salvador as part of President Nayib Bukele's aggressive war on gangs. Opened in January 2023, Bukele oversaw the transfer of the first 2,000 inmates to this mega-prison, officially called the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, CICOT.
Inside this mega prison, you'll find some of El Salvador's most dangerous gang members.
Bukele received significant support as the crime rate drastically declined, but he was also met with harsh criticism.
International watch groups say innocent people are being caught in the raids.
Relatives of those detained have been desperately trying to find out what's happened to them.
Human rights groups have been raising alarm over potential abuses, including overcrowded conditions and lengthy trials. Reports indicate deaths in custody and allegations of authorities preventing autopsies. So now the question is, can the beast be a solution, or will it become another chapter in a troubled history?
Packed into massive cells, towers of bunk beds, and what looks like bird cages.
Join me as I uncover the chilling truth behind this radical experiment. But before I dive into the debate, prepare to go inside. I'll show you what life is like within the very cells of this controversial mega-prison. Inside the cell. Picture a giant prison system holding people enough to fill a small city. That's CICOT for you, the biggest prison in the whole of the Americas. With 8 buildings made of super strong concrete, it looks seriously impressive, or maybe just seriously scary depending on how you see it. Each building has 32 cells, and they're pretty spacious at over 100 square meters, designed for more than 100 inmates. Inside each cell, there are 2 sinks and 2 toilets. But interestingly, there are no mattresses provided for the inmates' beds. Now yes, it's to torture them, but the main reason is so that they don't hide anything under the mattresses that may cause any chaos inside the facility. This facility is designed to house a whopping 40,000 detained gang members as part of President Nayib Bukele's aggressive approach to combat gangs. Located near the Chichontepec volcano in a rural valley, CICOT is characterized by strict security measures. The prison is constructed to hold a portion of the 62,975 gang members detained under special conditions and covers an area of 166 hectares. It consists of 8 pavilions enclosed by an 11-meter-high concrete wall fortified with electrified wire fences, showcasing its imposing infrastructure. Entering the prison requires passing through 3 heavily guarded gates where inmates undergo body scans and photo registration. The prison's self-sufficiency is ensured by drilled wells, a water supply plant, cisterns, power substations, emergency power plants, and a wastewater plant. Inside the prison, each cell block spans 6,000 square meters and accommodates more than 100 gang members in 32 steel-barred cells. The 100 square meter cells include 2 sinks, 2 toilets, and sleeping cabins made of iron sheets. Also, there are windowless punishment cells for misbehaving gang members. Inmates are restricted to their cells with no patios or recreation areas and are allowed to leave only for virtual judicial processes. The prison was constructed in 7 months by 3,000 people and is intended to house members of notorious gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18, known for activities such as extortion, contract killings, and drug sales. Now, why on earth will someone build a prison like this? To understand this, we need to learn about El Salvador's age-old fight against crime. Come on, let's look at some history to put things in perspective. El Salvador has faced enduring challenges linked to crime, largely attributed to the presence of various gangs. In 2011 alone, an estimated 25,000 gang members were at large, accompanied by another 43,500 behind bars. Not just that. 2 well-known gangs, Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, and 18th Street, locally referred to as Maras, have been prominent players. These gangs, along with emerging rivals like the Rebels 13, face opposition from death squads like Sombra Negra. With so much going on, one can imagine the condition of the area. But it's also important to remember that this is the final product of a long story. The roots of this violence stretch back to the Salvadoran Civil War, 1979 to 1992. Just so you know, this civil war claimed around 80,000 lives. The conflict forced half the population to flee due to widespread violence and poverty, and children were conscripted into both the military and the guerrilla group Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front. Although the war concluded with the Chapultepec peace accords, violence in El Salvador persisted, and it hasn't left the land to date. Post-war, many refugees who had sought asylum in Los Angeles became entangled in gang violence too. The U.S. war on drugs and anti-immigrant policies led to the deportation of thousands of Salvadorans, resulting in the export of gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18. This transnational spread significantly contributed to the proliferation of violence in El Salvador. In 2012, the city experienced a 41% drop in crime due to a government-initiated gang truce, reducing daily killings from 16 to fewer than 5. But this didn't go on for long, as the truce collapsed in 2014, leading to a resurgence in violence. The homicide rate in El Salvador has seen fluctuations over the years. For example, in 2021, it reached its lowest point since the end of the Civil War, with 18 homicides per 100,000 people, and the rate further plummeted amid the 2022 Salvadoran gang crackdown. As I said earlier, gangs, particularly MS-13 and Mara 18, play a significant role in the country's social violence. But why do new people keep joining these gangs? Well, it turns out gang involvement has deep-rooted causes, including poverty, family disintegration, violent domestic environments, and limited opportunities for education and development. All these social and economic issues force people to find a way out by joining hands with crime. The effect and gang dominance are so strong that government policies like La Mano Dura and Super Mano Dura have had to face criticism for their temporary successes and subsequent failures. The 2012 to 2014 gang truce was also an example of such efforts, as it aimed at reducing gang-related homicides. But not so surprisingly, it didn't take long for it to come to an end, leading to a spike in violence. Not only the government, but many non-governmental organizations like Homies Unidos have also been formed to prevent violence and gang membership among the youth in El Salvador. Apparently, these organizations provide support, programming, and resources to help young people navigate the challenges posed by gangs. With that said, it's clear that nothing has really worked out for the criminal acts in El Salvador, and that's what made the basis for a jail as inhumane as the beast. El Salvador's anti-gang measures. And since the topic is on, I think it's important to talk about all the measures that have been taken to avoid and stop what's happening in the area. El Salvador is pretty much the second name for a gang city. Years of poverty, civil unrest, and inequality created criminals that are now super difficult to be either corrected or captured. I mean, it's not normal for a city to have the highest homicide rate globally, with 103 per 100,000 people, right? This is what this one guy noticed and decided to do something about. The man in question is none other than Nayib Bukele. In 2019, Nayib Bukele emerged as a new leader with a strong stance against gang violence. And with his newfound mission, he introduced the Plan Control Territorial, which aimed to take back control of areas dominated by gangs by deploying more security forces, focusing on high crime zones, and disrupting the financial networks of these criminal groups. Although there were some positive outcomes initially, critics argued that this approach might have simply shifted violence elsewhere instead of addressing the underlying causes. But that wasn't the end of it. In fact, I'd say that was just the beginning, because this guy had some serious stuff going on in his head. In 2023, Bukele introduced CCOT, which was part of a bigger plan to deal with an even bigger problem. This prison is a key element in Bukele's strategy to combat gangs by isolating their leaders, disrupting communication, and preventing further recruitment. However, this move has sparked heated debates about human rights, concerns about overcrowding, and the absence of a clear plan for rehabilitation. Despite Bukele's efforts, the gang problem in El Salvador continues. While homicide rates have decreased during his presidency, there are lingering questions about potential violations of due process and the long-term effectiveness of such strict measures. Nayib Bukele, who advocates for a tough approach, is grappling with the challenge of balancing security measures with the rights and well-being of the citizens. At the moment, El Salvador is at a critical juncture, trying to address deep-rooted gang issues while upholding principles of justice and human rights. Now let's talk about how he got this horrifying prison made. The construction of the mega prison. In 2023, El Salvador made a major move in its battle against gang violence with the introduction of CCOT. But why is everyone talking about it? What's so special? Honestly, it's not an ordinary prison and might as well become one of the worst prisons in the world. I mean, it's safe to say that the architects went all out in crafting CCOT. It's an expansive complex enclosed by towering walls, equipped with cutting-edge security features. Not to mention, guard towers stand tall, giving the facility a fortress-like ambience. The goal was to establish a location where the government could closely monitor gang members, disrupting their communication channels and impeding their recruitment endeavors. But when we zoom out, it's mainly to ensure that the community can live in peace. Concentrating a massive number of gang members within CCOT is seen as a way to hit the reset button on the power dynamics that have long favored the gangs. But like any big plan, CCOT has its fair share of critics. One major concern is about human rights. Apparently, people are worried about the conditions for those living inside. The international community is also paying attention, especially groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. They're not shy about expressing their worries, emphasizing the need to maintain international standards even when dealing with crime. Controversies surrounding the mega prison. Ever since its inception, El Salvador's Center for the Confinement of Terrorism has become a point of heated debate, stirring a ton of controversies about its system and policies. Let's break this down. Human rights concerns. CCOT is caught up in significant controversy, mainly revolving around alleged violations of due process during President Bukele's state of exception. This period saw a mass detention effort where thousands were swiftly sent to the mega prison without the safeguard of proper trials. People argue that while these actions aimed to urgently curb gang violence, they raise serious concerns about fundamental human rights. The suspension of due process during these detentions poses critical questions about the legal integrity of the entire process. Not just that, the controversy surrounding CCOT is further intensified by allegations of torture and abuse. Disturbing reports from within the prison system have emerged, raising fears that CCOT might perpetuate the historical issues of violence and brutality within El Salvador's penal institutions. If substantiated, these allegations not only cast doubt on the ethical treatment of inmates, but also challenge the government's commitment to maintaining human rights standards. Other than that, while CCOT emphasizes control and containment, the absence of comprehensive initiatives for the reintegration and rehabilitation of inmates raises concerns. Without effective rehabilitation measures, there is a risk of fostering radicalization within the prison walls. The efficacy of CCOT in achieving its intended goals is under scrutiny. Critics question whether the mega prison is merely a containment facility or a genuine effort to break the cycle of gang violence. The absence of transparent information about rehabilitation strategies fuels skepticism about the long-term impact of this colossal endeavor. Government defense versus human rights organizations. The Salvadoran government, led by President Bukele, argues that CCOT is a necessary and bold step to address the urgent issue of gang violence. They say that the iron fist approach is crucial for restoring peace and security, citing the pressing nature of the situation as a justification for temporarily suspending certain rights. However, some organizations have very serious allegations against the government and its new strategy. They emphasize the importance of transparency, adherence to due process, and humane treatment of inmates. This debate reflects a broader clash of ideologies between stringent security measures and the protection of individual liberties. Within the web of controversies surrounding El Salvador's mega prison, many lingering questions persist about finding the delicate balance between security imperatives and the safeguarding of human rights. Here is a case study that will help you guys understand the whole picture of why people are criticizing the government. Case of Diego. This case will put a face to everything that we have talked about. Yes, we need to instill order and end gang violence. But there's a very thin line that authorities need to take care of. Let's take a closer look at the case of Diego, who fell victim to the grand strategy of the El Salvador government. After El Salvador declared a state of emergency, a 22-year-old student named Diego was just going to buy some tortillas near his house when police stopped him for a routine check. Even though he had no criminal record or ties to any gangs, they put him in a crowded prison with lots of others in 2022. So, in the initial 2 months of the state of emergency, authorities arrested over 33,000 people, almost doubling the prison population. Diego's story shows a glimpse of the shared experience of many others as he found himself sharing space with the gangs, who traditionally were the most formidable occupants of the country's jails. Diego surprisingly doesn't see the gangs inside the prison as a big threat. He says they just ask inmates to follow some rules. His bigger concern is the prison guards, who he says are violent and hit prisoners for no reason, keeping tight control. Others who were in jail during the state of emergency say the same, highlighting how security forces in El Salvador's prisons use a lot of force and keep strict control. The government, through extreme measures, has altered the power dynamics within the prison system, turning the tables on imprisoned gang members. Despite concerns about severe overcrowding and potential regrouping of gangs within jails, the report suggests that the extreme measures, including near-complete control by prison authorities, have, for now, prevented the gangs from mounting a collective response to the crackdown. There is a muted response from the gangs within prisons, noting that the severe overcrowding, coupled with the extreme measures to control prisoners, has hindered their ability to regroup or retaliate effectively. There are many reports that raise crucial questions about the long-term sustainability and effectiveness of the government's strategy, especially considering past challenges where gang leaders managed to regain control of their jail cells. Media portrayal and misconceptions. Despite the government's efforts to present El Salvador's mega prison as a solution to the country's gang violence issues, media portrayals have predominantly depicted the facility in a negative light. It has constantly been described as a human rights nightmare and a concrete cage. The prison has faced significant criticism for its harsh conditions, lack of transparency, and potential to exacerbate gang violence. Reports of violence and gang activity within the prison have further fueled negative perceptions. Incidents such as riots and gang fights resulting in inmate deaths have been cited, raising questions about the effectiveness of the facility in curbing rather than fostering violence. Allegations of human rights abuses, including torture and mistreatment of inmates, have added to the negative narrative. Despite these issues, some positive portrayals of the prison emphasize its role in enhancing overall security. The facility boasts high security features such as tall walls, surveillance cameras, and armed guards, contributing to a reduction in gang violence across El Salvador. However, critics argue that the media tends to focus more on the prison's security measures than on the inherent problems caused by the treatment of gang members within its walls. But how does the media and its narrative differ from what is actually happening? Real pictures of inmates and conditions. Pictures coming out of the prison portray the true nature of this effort, exposing a harsh reality behind the massive walls of C-Cot. The pictures from inside the mega prison offer an unaltered view of the daily lives of inmates held within its extensive confines. These images dispel any doubts of being AI-generated or sensationalized for clickbait, underscoring the seriousness of the government's undertaking. Inmates, sporting shaved heads and bodies marked with tattoos, visibly carry the unmistakable signs of a life deeply rooted in gang culture. These photographs are not staged. Instead, they are genuine snapshots, illustrating the repercussions of an ongoing and unyielding battle against gang violence. Separating fact from fiction. These pictures give a real and unfiltered look at things, but it's important to clear up any potential misunderstandings. The goal of showing the tattoos and the strict rules isn't to make a big show or portray the inmates as villains, but rather to highlight how the government is taking a tough stance against gang violence. The tattoos, which often show allegiance to gangs, are crucial for identifying and separating inmates in the prison system. It's important to recognize that the debate about El Salvador's anti-gang strategy revolves around the complicated balance between security needs and individual rights. The drop in crime rates in El Salvador, seen in the decrease in homicides and extortions, suggests that the government's approach is producing real results. However, the ethical and long-term consequences of these measures are still under intense scrutiny and discussion. The mega prison, even though it symbolizes containment, sparks a larger conversation about rehabilitation, addressing the root causes of crime and ensuring the rights of those who are incarcerated. Now, you all must be wondering, why is El Salvador like this? El Salvador confronts substantial dangers, leading to the perceived need for a large-scale prison system. A key factor contributing to heightened violence is the widespread drug trafficking in Central America. The region's strategic location makes it a focal point for illegal drug trade, fostering an increase in criminal activities. Youth violence and the pervasive presence of gangs also contribute significantly to the danger in El Salvador. The majority of homicide victims and members of youth gangs belong to the 15 to 34 age group. With more than 900 gangs and around 70,000 members in Central America, these groups play a significant role in driving overall crime rates. Addressing these complex issues is crucial to enhancing the safety and well-being of the population. The situation is further complicated by the easy access to firearms. Prolonged civil wars and an influx of imported weapons have resulted in Central America being inundated with an excess of firearms. This surplus not only contributes to violent conflicts, but also presents a significant challenge for law enforcement in their efforts to control criminal activities. Moreover, weak legal systems hinder the effectiveness of crime prevention and punishment efforts. The low rate of crimes solved and criminals punished perpetuates a cycle of impunity where those involved in criminal activities are carried by the lack of consequences. Addressing these challenges is crucial for establishing a safer and more secure environment in the region. So, the main goal, or rather the point of it all, is that such a facility can contribute to better control, deterrence, and rehabilitation efforts in response to the pressing security concerns facing the nation. Comparisons with other prisons. Other countries are dealing with gang problems too, and they're also using big prisons. Let's take a look at some other places and see how they're handling things with gang members. Similarities. El Salvador's mega prison is part of a global trend where numerous facilities are being built to handle a large number of inmates. It's not alone in this. Similar approaches are seen in prisons like the New Bilibid Prison in the Philippines, Bang Kwang Central Prison in Thailand, and the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in the United States. The shared goal is to control gang activity and reduce violence by keeping a significant population under tight security conditions. One common feature among these mega-prisons is the emphasis on strict security measures. They all employ fortified walls, advanced surveillance technology, and specialized units for high-risk individuals. These security features are not confined to one country, they echo across borders. El Salvador's dedication to isolating gang leaders is consistent with the global trend of implementing stringent security protocols to maintain order within these facilities. The commitment to robust security measures is a shared characteristic that transcends geographical boundaries. Differences. When it comes to dealing with inmates, El Salvador's mega-prison leans towards a punitive approach, focusing on isolation. However, prisons worldwide take different routes. Take Norway's Holden prison, for example, which prioritizes rehabilitation through individual cells, workshops, and educational programs. This approach stands in contrast to the situation in Brazil, where overcrowded and gang-controlled facilities highlight potential issues with large-scale incarceration without robust rehabilitation initiatives. In managing gangs within the prison, El Salvador isolates gang leaders to disrupt communication networks and prevent further recruitment. On the other hand, the Philippines' New Bilibid prison opts for a different strategy, with dedicated sections for various gangs, potentially encouraging negotiations and internal control through hierarchical structures. These different approaches raise essential questions about the long-term effectiveness of different strategies in curbing gang influence within the confines of prison walls. The balance between rehabilitation and punishment, as well as the management of gang dynamics, remains a critical aspect for the success of prison systems globally. Countries like Norway, which focus on rehabilitation, aim to tackle the root causes of criminal behavior and help inmates reintegrate into society. In contrast, El Salvador's approach, emphasizing isolation and punishment, is more traditional. This raises concerns about potential overcrowding and the absence of comprehensive rehabilitation programs. To truly assess the success of these strategies, ongoing analysis of crime rates, recidivism, and the long-term impact on individuals within the prison system is necessary. It's not just about the numbers, but also about the well-being and future prospects of those involved in these systems. El Salvador's fight against gangs has landed us before a colossal prison unlike any other. Inside, inmates with shaved heads and gang tattoos serve as a stark reminder of the violence this nation seeks to quell. Is this a symbol of a government taking decisive action, or a descent into questionable solutions? The debate rages on. While some see the beast as a necessary evil, others fear the human rights implications of its sheer size and reported living conditions. This video has only scratched the surface. The questions remain. Will this beast of a prison truly tame the beast within? Can El Salvador find lasting solutions without sacrificing its values? The future remains unwritten, but one thing is certain: the world will be watching.